Hello guys, meet me again, Cindy Himawan, and today's our topic is about manufacturing process. Okay, so even though when we talk about the manufacturing, it means that it's the process of producing, right? We build something or we produce something, but when we learn about ERP, we cannot just jumping directly into the manufacturing process itself. So we need to start from what we call with the uh, manufacturing. So the manufacturing process that we're going to learn today will be start from what we call with the manufacturing planning. Okay, so in the manufacturing planning, okay, so this is the where all the production planning will be start first. Okay, so before we can say that okay, we want to produce 100 pieces or 200 pieces or so on, then we need to go through the manufacturing planning first. Okay, so in the beginning we will go to the what we call with the strategic planning. Okay, so let's imagine if in the beginning of the year the company, all the functional department will be in that meeting. Okay, so the boss, uh, imagine that the boss uh, can whether in your mind, okay, can you imagine that the boss suddenly asking to the production manager, asking, hey production manager, okay, so how many pieces that you want to produce by this year? Okay, so it's not possible, right? The production manager might not be able to answer that question because that production manager don't know um, how much exactly that he needs to produce. So how to define how many that we need to produce? Then we need to start what we call with the strategic planning. Okay, so inside the strategic planning, okay, so basically the strategic planning here will be done by all the executive level, like the VP, vice president, the director, and the list may be only the manager. Okay, but mostly the strategic planning will be decided in the beginning of the year and decided by the executive level. Okay, so in that meeting, okay, usually the sales department already bring what we call with the forecasting. Okay, so they already know that okay, roughly for this year how many pieces demand, okay, uh, that will come into the company. So how the forecasting so, will be held is from sales information system. This is the history data, yeah. Okay, so that's why it's important to record the sales data properly. Okay, so later on we will going to learn about the sales processing. Okay, so in that sales processing, all the data will be recorded in the system, and that sales data, okay, will be collected in the sales information system, and that data will be used into forecasting. Okay, so the sales department usually will use many technique of forecasting. Okay, they can use like the time series forecasting. Okay, in that time series they will define, okay, if this year this amount, so next year will be how much amount. Okay, so there are many technique of forecasting that I will not explain in this session, okay, because I think that one is already covered in the another subject. Okay, so but not only rely on, so the forecasting is not only rely on the sales information system, but we also need to consider about the costing and profitability analysis. Okay, so if you still remember when we learned about the financial and accounting, there is a different, right? So in the finance, we know about the financial position of the company. We know whether we are profit or not in terms of the whole company. But in the management accounting, in the managerial accounting, we can do detailed analysis, so we know which product is profitable or which area is profitable. Okay, so let's say that the previous year, uh, product A is having high demand. Okay, but why the product A having a high demand? Because we have a lot of promotion for that product A. Okay, so when we talk about the next year, then we need to decide whether the demand can be the same or not. Okay, so if, let's say, the product A is having a high demand because of the discount, so it's possible that the profitable is not really good. So it means that if we only using the SIS as forecasting, then the system will say that, the product A is having high demand last year, so it means that this year product A also will have high demand. But actually we can decide, okay, using the COPA report, we can know whether the product A is really profitable or not. If we think that the product A is not really profitable, then we can adjust our forecasting. Okay, so the same things goes like, let's say in the previous year there is like a pandemic. Okay, so that's why the masker or maybe the healthcare, the health tools and everything is going up. So when we talk about the next year, okay, so whether we still wants to have the masker in a high demand, or we want to do some adjustment. Okay, so that's why in the forecasting we have two things to be considered, yeah, the last history and also whether the goods or the product is really profitable or not. Okay, then let's say in the forecasting we already decide then usually even let's say the forecasting saying, okay, this year we want to saying 1000 pieces. Okay, and then using the SOP discussion, sales and operation planning discussion, so the department, so in the SOP is actually not only the sales, yeah, but there will be a sales department, there will be a production department, the purchasing, the inventory, the FI, basically all the department will be giving a suggestion on the planning. So if we already decide based on the forecast we want to produce 1000, so we need to know the production will consider whether the machine is enough or not. Okay, the capacity, is it enough? Or maybe if let's say the machine is enough, the capacity is enough, but how about the labor? Whether do you need to buy a new machine, or do you need to buy do you need to hire more labor, okay, or something like that. Then and then in the purchasing they will talk about like whether the raw material is possible to be provided on time. Okay, because we know to produce 1000 it means maybe we need to increase our agreement with the vendor and so on. Okay, and then from the inventory side, then they will consider whether the the warehouse capacity is enough or not, whether the capacity for raw material or the capacity for the finished goods, whether this both storage is enough or not. Okay, and also in terms of the finance, they will consider like whether the money is enough to buy, or whether we need to bring more stocks gitu ya, bring more stock tuh maksudnya saham gitu ya, bring more equity, bring more modal gitu ya. So basically all the department here will discussion whether it's possible to fulfill that demand. Okay, and then after the discussion, so they will making some strategies. Okay, so in the demand management we can define the strategies. Okay, so let's say we can think that because even though we need 1000, okay, then our machine capacity is not enough. Okay, so we can calculate in the SOP. We already calculate if we buy a new machine, then how much we need to invest, and so on and so on. And then it might be decided that it's not worth it to buy a new machine, because when you buy a new machine, then you need to have more labor, more staff, more maintenance, and so on and so on. So it seems like it's not worth it to buy a new machine. So how we cope up with the demand? So we can decide, let's say in the demand management, we can define the strategies like 1000. Okay, so for the 200, okay, because currently our capacity is only 800, so this 800 will be handled by in-source. Okay, internal sourcing, whereby this 200 will be done outsourced, so we can buy from other company. Okay, so let's say we just see if our stock enough, then we can pull out from our production. But if it's not enough, then we can buy from other vendor. Okay, maybe we can find out the similar specification, and so on and so on. Okay, so in the end we decide that this 200 is buy from outsource. Okay, and again in the demand management we also can decide, okay, what is the strategy to fulfill this. Okay, whether we want to have the MTS, okay, whether we want to have MTO, whether we want to have ATO, okay, assembly, or we want to have the configurable. Yeah, okay, because when we need to decide if we want to use the strategies MTS, it's mean that we need to make sure that our raw material is always provided. Okay, but if we use MTO, then how long we can provide to the customer, and so on. Okay, so basically we need to define this strategy. Okay, and it can have a lot of consideration, because like example like KFC, if they decide to use MTS, why? Because their value is giving a fast food. Okay, so that's why they use strategy MTS. But it also means that the MTS need to be supported by the enough capacity of storage, right? So if the capacity is not enough to have some stock, then what is the workaround? Okay, so it's mean if your capacity is enough, then you can use the MTS. But if your capacity is, if you don't want to keep many stocks, then you can have you need to make sure that your production is fast. Okay, example, like again, like KFC, you know that for burger it's not possible to do MTS things because the burger needs to be fresh, right? So it's mean that you need to make sure that you have the enough capacity, you have enough labor to make that burger fast. Okay, because basically you already promised to the customer that you will have a fast food. So it's mean that even though you're not possible to use MTS strategy, so what is the workaround? Okay, so that is what we call with the demand management. We do the strategy. Okay, and after we do the demand management, then it will goes to the MPS. MPS is master production scheduling. Okay, so in the master production scheduling, we will have a schedule. So which product should be produced first, depend on the profitability, or can be depend on the difficulty, okay, or maybe depend on the characteristic. Okay, so let's say if we have two products, the one is more sellable, more popular, so of course you need to produce that product first before the other products. Okay, but it's also possible that let's say again, when we talk about the KFC, okay, so we know that we have the uh, we have the chicken fillet. Okay, we have the chicken, and that chicken actually also can be used, let's say, can be used for the burger. Okay, so basically the same raw material but can be used for many products. So of course, because that product can be used for many products, so we can prioritize that product to be produced first. Okay, so the using the MPS, we will define the scheduling, which product goes first. Okay, so can be depend on the profitable, or depend on the characteristic, or depend on the needs. Okay, and then after the MPS, then it will goes to the MRP. So that's what we call with the material requirement planning. So in the material requirement planning, okay, so if the MPS will resort a schedule and priority. Okay, meanwhile in the MRP, we will define the net requirement. Okay, so the MRP basically will calculate so how many pieces that we need to do now, okay, in this day, okay, in this time, so how many we need to buy. So MRP will collect all the things, okay, like if there's any, so the MRP will be consider like safety stock. Okay, safety stock is the minimum stock that always that have to be in our inventory, yeah, to for a safety reason. So the MRP will calculate whether we need to have a safety stock or not, and then it will calculate like, do we have any pending order. Okay, and then it will consider also like the capacity, lot sizing. Okay, so if our capacity, if let's say in KFC they can fry 20 pieces per batch. Okay, so usually they will following also, so it's mean that they will at one batch they will fry 20. But if the net requirement saying we need 30, so it means that we will do two batch production, okay, so which is 20 and 20. So it means that usually it will be uh, suitable with the strategy of MTS. Okay, usually that's why usually in the SOP they already talking about like the capacity, they already know, but so we can decide properly, okay, so how much we can produce during that time. Okay, so the MRP actually can trigger two things, can trigger for the production or can trigger on the procurement. Okay, so it will be depend on these things, yeah, this depend whether we already define the goods is in source or outsource. So in the MRP again, it will calculate the net requirement, okay, to calculate the quantity, and then from this MRP it will generate it into two things. If we already define that the product will be produced outsourced, then it will goes to the procurement process. Okay, that's why if you remember when we learn about in the purchasing process, one of the origin of the PR is actually from MRP. Okay, so the MRP will calculate like how much we need to buy, or maybe we need buy the raw material, or in this case we need to buy the finished goods itself. Okay, so it will trigger the procurement. But if we already decide that we want to produce in source, so it will trigger the manufacturing execution. Okay, so in the manufacturing execution, okay, we will have what we call with the planning order. So the MRP will trigger a planning order. If you still remember in the purchasing process, okay, so if I come back here, the MRP will the MRP in the procurement process will generate PR, right, purchase requisition, but in the PP it will generate what we call it with the planning order. Okay, so that's what we call with the planning order. So in the planning order it will define what is the material finished goods that we want to produce. Okay, because system already define the prioritize, right, so it will telling you which material finished goods that you need to build. So of course it's mean that you need to prepare the master data of material finished goods first. Okay, so before the planning order can be run, so of course our material finished goods data already have to be ready first, and then we need to define the BOM. Okay, BOM, bill of material, it means you need to define the component to build that material finished goods. And then you also need to define the lot sizing. The lot sizing here means you define the capacity of the production. So in one time batch production, how many quantity that can be produced. Okay, and then from the MRP itself, it's already telling you the net requirement quantity here, yeah. So whether it's 100 pieces, 200 pieces, and so on, the MRP will calculate this one. Okay, so after the planning order is generated automatically, so usually this one is auto, yeah, auto generated, then the production people, they will see there is a planning order, then they will confirm it, Okay, so they convert it into manufacturing order, whereby in the manufacturing order later we will see what we call with the routing. Okay, so routing is actually another master data whereby if BOM is talking about the component. Okay, meanwhile routing is talking about the activity. Okay, activity steps. So together, BOM and routing, it seems like a recipe. Okay, like when you open the food recipe, how to make this food, then you will see there is a BOM, because you will see there is a component. What is the component that you need to make that food, and then after that you will see there is lot sizing. It will telling you this component can produce how many portion. Okay, that's what we call with the lot sizing. Okay, and then you will see the routing is the step by step. So you need to put the raw material A, and then you mix with the raw material B, and then you need to boil it, and then you need to blah 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 blah. That's what we call it the routing or activity steps. Okay, and then inside the routing we have what we call with the work center. So the work center here is basically we need to define what is the machine, and what is the labor that we use for doing these activity steps. Okay, so let's say when we do the when we dry the raw material A, then we need to use a drying machine, so we need to define the machine. Okay, so that's what we call with the work center. So later on the work center, because in the work center will have a machine and labor, so the work center here is actually will be related with the cost. Okay, with the production cost. Okay, because we will define like how many hours machine we need, and then how many hours of labor we need. So later on the cost will be held in the work center. Okay, so we have master data, material, finished goods, BOM, routing, and work center. Okay, so after the manufacturing order created, then a system will do what we call with the material reservation. Okay, so all the components, all the BOM that already defined will be reserved. Okay, so now the system actually will check again. Okay, will check whether the raw material is available. Okay, usually the raw material supposedly already available, right? As we already discussed before, that even though the manufacturing order is MTO, but still the the raw material should be MTS. Yeah, so that's why actually usually the raw material is already available, okay, before the production can be start. But the things is, it's possible also that by the time we do the production, we might lack some spare part, like some raw material. So that's why it will check whether the raw material is available or not. If this not available, then it can generate PR also. Okay, so that's why if you still remember, if you go back to the purchasing process, you will see also that the PR actually can be origin from MRP, in the previous slide, yeah, we learned that when the MRP calculate the net requirement, and then it can generate PR. But it's also possible if, let's say, when we want to do the manufacturing, and then we find out that the raw material is not enough, so it also will trigger a PR. Okay, then it will goes to the PO, and then the inbound delivery order, and then it will goes to goods receipt. Okay, until the goods is received in our warehouse. Okay, then we can do what we call with the material reservation. So when we do the material reservation, so example, let's say previously we have stock for component A is 1000. Okay, so before we do the material reservation, we call this as a free stock. Okay, we can call this as a free stock, or sometimes it can be called as an unrest. Yeah. Okay, sometimes we can call it as an on hand or unrestricted stock. Okay, but by the time we do the reservation, so if we see our stock is still 1000, but now the stock is become block or reserve. Okay, so let's say we need 200. Okay, so if we see into the if we check into the stock, we will see that the stock is still 1000, but now you will see that 800 is on hand and 200 is block or reserve. Okay, so it means that if there is another production that they will need 1000, then system will saying that the stock is not enough, even though actually we have 1000, yeah, but because currently we only have 800 on hand, or 800 unrest, so if there is another production wants to reserve the products, then the system will say that the stock is not enough. Okay, so that's what happened in the material reservation. Okay, and then after it's already booked, and then we will move, okay, from the raw material storage location. Okay, so this is from the raw material, then it will move, or it will goods issue into the shop floor. Okay, so it will move here, yeah. So now if we check, there will be a stock movement. Okay, there will be a stock movement that now the position, if we check into the stock in the raw material, it will be saying that the stock now is only 800, because the 200 is already moved into shop floor as log. Okay, so the journal will be the inventory raw material is reduced. Okay, but then it will move into inventory working in process. Okay, work in process, sorry. Why? Because currently this 200 is moved into shop floor. Okay, so that's why that's why the asset also move, yeah. So previously in the raw material, and now become inventory work in process. Okay, so the shop floor activity, so the shop floor is meaning that the manufacture is being executed. Okay, so the routing, the all the activity that defined here will be executed here. Okay, together with all the component needed also will be executed here. Okay, and then after it's done, then we will do what we call with the completion. Okay, so the manufacturing order will be put into status completion, and it will calculate the actual cost. Okay, so the actual cost here can consist of the raw material cost, and then the machine cost, like exactly how many time, and then also the labor cost. Okay, so all this actual costs will be later on will be posted into the financial. Okay, and then meanwhile the goods will be moved to finished goods as log. So that's why now we will have the journal is inventory finished goods increasing, and the inventory work in process is reducing. So if we look into here, okay, the inventory finished goods, so the inventory work in process, okay, here is swap with the inventory work in process here, right? So it's mean the inventory raw material reduce and now convert, okay, into inventory finished goods. Okay, but because there are two steps, so that's why first the raw material move into the work in process, and then the working process move into finished goods. Okay, so that will be the whole process of manufacturing planning and manufacturing execution. Thank you.